This may come as a shock, but the United States does not have a king. We got rid of one during the Revolutionary War. He was called King George. And now King Barack has learned from the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision that he's not a king either.
The court determined that the president violated the Constitution when he made some government appointments without the approval of Congress. George Thomas has the story.
It was a unanimous rebuke by all 9 justices on the bench. The ruling takes the president to task for misusing his recess appointment powers, in effect bypassing Congress to put his people in place.
So a big win for those who consider this congressional power means something, that we're not just in a place where it's all about executive power.
The court said Mr. Obama's appointments of 3 individuals to the National Labor Relations Board in 2012 were illegal. He made the appointments during a 3-day Senate break, but the court said that was unconstitutional since the Senate was not actually in a formal recess.
It's a loss for the Obama administration. They fought this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Their appointments were invalidated as unconstitutional.
Thursday's ruling has only fueled Republican criticism that the president routinely oversteps his powers and acts without authority from lawmakers. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell welcomed the court's decision, saying in a statement, quote, "A unanimous Supreme Court has rejected this brazen power grab."
So the president still has his Article 2, Section 2 recess appointment power, and so will future presidents. But you can't toy around with that and start making up phony recesses. So it was a rebuke directly of what the Obama administration and President Obama were trying to do.
It was the 13th unanimous loss for the Obama administration at the Supreme Court in the last 2 years. The White House said it was deeply disappointed with the ruling, but vowed the president will continue to exercise his executive authority. The ruling comes as House Speaker John Boehner is preparing a lawsuit against the president for abuse of executive power. George Thomas, CBN News.
George. Now listen, folks. He's supposed to be a constitutional law professor. At least that's what he held out on his resume, that he used to teach constitutional law. I don't think he learned much. 13 times the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, has ruled against him 13 times. What kind of a president is it who thinks he can just jump all over the Congress? And the problem is he's got 2 compliant leaders. He's got Nancy Pelosi in the House and he's got Harry Reid in the Senate. And they go along with whatever he wants to do. They're his lapdogs. It looks like the Democrats would stand up and say no. There used to be a man named Bob Byrd. He was Senator Byrd from West Virginia. He carried a copy of the Constitution around with him. He loved the Constitution. He's a terrific guy. I got to know him. He's just a wonderful man. But he would never, although he was a Democrat, he never would have permitted a president of his own party to play these games. But hey, he's doing it, and you elected him. But if that defeat wasn't bad enough, the Obama administration has also lost another case at the Supreme Court yesterday. Mark Martin has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Mark.
Pat, the High Court struck down the so-called buffer zones around abortion clinics in Massachusetts. The Obama administration had joined the Massachusetts Attorney General in supporting the zones, but the Supreme Court said they violated the First Amendment rights of pro-life protesters. Paul Strand has the story from the Supreme Court.
The Massachusetts bubble zone law allowed people to talk about anything but abortion and all choices surrounding the life of an unborn baby within 35 feet of an abortion clinic. All 9 justices struck the law down, saying it was way too much of a burden on free speech.
And what is in fact the case outside of most abortion clinics these days are people who are simply peacefully trying to provide information and praying outside abortion clinics.
Kristen Hawkins of Students for Life says this is a big victory for students who want to counsel other young women outside clinics not to get an abortion.
And these young people see turnarounds every time they go in front of the abortion facility because they're the same age as the girl walking in. And so she looks at them and says, why are you out here? You know, why are you giving up your Saturday to be here to help me? And it causes her to think maybe there's something wrong with what I'm about to do.
The court said not only did Massachusetts bubble zone violate the rights of the sidewalk counselors, but also the women who might have heard a pro-life message from them and decided not to get an abortion.
This is a defense of free speech, a defense of religious liberty, and really a defense of women's informed consent, so that they have a right to know what abortion is about.
You know, even if you don't like the point of view, in this country, we get to express it.
Reverend Rob Schenck was actually in the courtroom when the Chief Justice announced the ruling. Pro-choice forces say it means abortion clinic workers and their customers will face more danger and harassment from pro-lifers. Schenck says the Chief Justice and court dismissed that argument.
The other side tries to disparage these good people and make them out to be crazed maniacs that are violent and threatening. And in fact, the Supreme Court of the United States said nothing could be more false or less true.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
The Christian mother who had been sentenced to death for refusing to give up her Christianity is free again. Miriam Ibrahim walked out of a Khartoum police station Thursday carrying her infant daughter hours after she was ordered released. She had been condemned to die for marrying a Christian and abandoning the Muslim faith. Ibrahim's sentence was overturned, but she was detained again on accusations of forging travel documents. The State Department says the U.S. believes Ibrahim has the documents she needs to travel to the U.S., but it's up to the government of Sudan to allow her to leave the country. Pat?
You know, I think, ladies and gentlemen, we have to realize the persecution of Christians overseas has reached a crescendo. In historic Christian populations like we have in Iraq, what have been in Iran, what we have, of course, in the Sudan, it's shocking what's being done. And every time the persecutors are Islamic, every time the persecution against Christians has come from the, quote, religion of peace. These people are fanatic, and they're fanatic on destroying Christianity. It is heartland, at the birthplace of Christianity across North Africa and throughout the Middle East. And we need to pray, we need to stand in the gap for these brave people, because they're losing their homes, they're losing their families, they're losing their freedom, and they're losing their lives. And this one woman became a symbol of the persecution that takes place in the Sudan, which has gone way over the edge. As I say, some years ago, I was with the then Vice President George Bush, and we visited the Sudan and met with President Numeri. In those days, he was a fairly benign leader. Then the Sudan fell under the control of radical Islamists, and persecution has come, especially a cleansing of the South Sudan area, when they now have their own country, but up to that point, terrible. And then the Janjaweed, these militants riding camels would come into the villages where these innocent black people were, and they'd slaughter them. We've got to do something about this. We've got to stand up. But you don't hear anything coming out of Washington. We need to make a stand. Most powerful nation on the earth, we need to stand for these who are being, you know, well, victimized in ways we can't imagine. Mark?
Yeah, we need to stand. We also need to pray, like you said, Pat. Well, Christians are also under fire in Iraq amidst the deadly violence there. The most cohesive fighting force opposing the Islamic group ISIS is the Kurdish military called the Peshmerga. The name literally means those who face death. Chris Mitchell spent time with them on the front lines in strategic Kirkuk and saw how they live up to their name.
The battleground with ISIS includes small villages like this one next to the border. We joined the Peshmerga working with district Iraqi police right after a deadly incident. We're south of Kirkuk right now in a small village and just about a half a mile from ISIS forces. A little while ago, 2 bombs were set off, 2 policemen died. Now these forces are rounding up suspects and preparing to attack the ISIS forces.
We have information that people from outside this village came to destroy the situation here.
Moments after our interview, they called off the attack, but did take a number of suspects away. We drove out of the village on the way to a strategic Peshmerga checkpoint. most heavily armed like this policeman with his RPG. As we drove through the oil-rich area, you could see some of the refineries in the distance. When we arrived, we found the Peshmerga dug in, close to the front lines of ISIS. This is the end of the road for the Kurdish military. This is their last checkpoint. But if you look down the road here and see that bridge in the distance, that's the first checkpoint for ISIS and the beginning of the region and the area that they control. Soon, dozens of Peshmerga and Iraqi police strode past the checkpoint. They're headed to the village next door on a critical mission. What's happening now is that the Peshmerga, the Kurdish military, is going a house-by-house search in this village, which is just beyond their front lines, and they believe people here may be supporting ISIS.
Yes, surely, because down at the bridge, we saw a teenager. They sent him to do something against us, but he hid himself.
But instead of a teenager, the Peshmerga and police uncovered two terrorists, one from Saudi Arabia, the other from Sudan, both on a wanted list. Our guide translates the confrontation.
His name exists in this list, that he's a terrorist, you know? And the officer says, you are wanted by our force. He says, no, I'm only wanted by God.
They arrested them along with a number of other suspects and took them away for questioning. In this ongoing battle, the stakes are high, particularly in Kirkuk. This is a very strategic region. Just a couple of weeks ago, the 12th Iraqi Division controlled this area. They left a vacuum for the Peshmerga, the Kurdish military, to fill. And now they control some of the richest oil fields in the Middle East. After June 10th, when the Iraqi army collapsed, the Peshmerga stepped in and saved thousands of lives, including many Christians. For example, they protected the village of Bartilla with 25,000 Christians. But many on the front lines expect it will get worse.
We expect that they want to fight. They would like to attack and fight against the Peshmerga, so we're expecting a bigger war.
Earlier in the day, back in Erbil, the Peshmerga Secretary General showed us on his map that now they must defend a 1,000-kilometer border with ISIS. That's more than 600 miles. They stand in the gap against this fanatical group and face a daunting challenge. But the Peshmerga say they're ready.
Surely it's dangerous, but the Peshmerga are ready to fight. We are ready to protect the Arab, Christians, Assyrians, and Turkmen. We are the people of Kirkuk and ready to sacrifice our life to the last drop of our blood.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the front lines with the Peshmerga.
Wow, the Peshmerga are brave warriors, Pat.
That's an incredible story that Chris did. He tells us that he was talking to some of the leaders of the Peshmerga, and they informed him that they knew in advance that this ISIS group was going to be moving and attacking, and they warned the government in Baghdad that it was coming, and their warning was ignored. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what does the United States do? Our Secretary of State goes over there and tells the Kurds that they need to tie in to that ineffective bunch in Baghdad under the government of Maliki. There is no way they're going to do that. The Kurds are brave, wonderful people, and they have shown a propensity for democracy, and they have a prosperous region in the area they control. Now they've gotten those oil fields in Kirkuk, and they're not going to give them up. Now, what needs to happen is the United States should come out boldly and say, we support a separate state for the Kurds. Now, we ought to do that. And we ought to also come out and say, we support the pro-democracy people in Egypt and those who are opposed to the Muslim Brotherhood. It's time we take a stand. But we're not doing it. We're sending a mixed message, but particularly the Kurds. And I think the Turks are looking for some signal from us. We should say we have got to have, there's got to be in the Middle East a stable country, and we want to back the Kurdish people in their quest for autonomy. It'll be a simple thing to do. They're ready to do it. And we need at the same time to back the revolutionary forces in Iran who want to overthrow the mullahs and the dictatorship there. We must come out for freedom and make it clear where we come, where we're coming from. Mark?
Amen to that. Well, here at home, a disturbing story. 1 in 10 working-age Americans die from causes related to drinking too much alcohol. That's according to a new report from the Centers for Disease Control. Some of the causes include heavy drinking and binge drinking, as well as alcohol poisoning, violence related to drinking, car accidents, and longer-term health problems like liver disease or heart disease. The study also says that lives were cut short on average, get this, by about 30 years. Pat, this should be a wake-up call to America about the dangers of excessive drinking.
Mark, let's hope so. Terry, I do hope that that message sinks through to you, and you're going to...
Absolutely. I'm giving it all up.
Well, I told our producer, giving it up, actually. About 50 years ago, I gave it all up, but I'm very happy that no way.
But those are startling numbers, aren't they?
It's incredible, unbelievable.
Really?
You know, we've got that war on drugs. It's costing us billions and billions and billions of dollars, and it is a failure. Now, what about the worst drug? It's alcohol, because so many people in the upper classes booze. We don't do anything to control the drinking. I mean, it's, you know, we advertise it and we do all this stuff.
Well, we live in an interesting time where people, rather than dealing with their issues, mask a lot of what they're going through, their pain, their hurt, with not just alcohol, but drugs as well.
And it's not politically correct to criticize somebody because they're an alcoholic. I mean, that's just, but anyhow, I applaud AA and the programs that they have and organizations like that, but this is a national epidemic.
The interest in soccer is high in the U.S. during this year's World Cup Championships. Americans across the country tuned in to Thursday's match between the U.S. and Germany. Thousands showed up at this World Cup watch party on Wall Street, and U.S. troops from Afghanistan also watched the showdown. Germany won the important game by just 1 goal, but the U.S. will advance to the next round. And I know we were all happy here in the newsroom as well. Operation Blessing is continuing its fight against human trafficking at the World Cup. Operation Blessing teams are on the ground in Brazil showing an original documentary film called One Reel, The Other Side of the Coin, to help protect vulnerable children from becoming victims of sex trafficking. And teams are conducting additional anti-trafficking efforts, including flash mobs in red light districts, distributing food and hope bags to girls on the streets, as well as distributing flyers with information on where victims can seek help. And you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to their website at ob.org.